The Trump administration is waging an all-out war on woke American universities, and the Department of Education found the University of Pennsylvania violated Title IX. So May Mailman, she's the senior White House policy strategist. She shared an update on X, and I love this because last week she says that Penn has 8 days left. Well, time has run out, and she joins us now. So May, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It was great to see you when we were in D.C. So what's going on with this fight for the University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so the University of Pennsylvania, we launched a Title IX investigation at the very beginning of the administration. And Title IX protects women's equal opportunity. And if you have men competing against women, taking women's roster spots away, and if you have men in women's private spaces, women's locker rooms, women's bathrooms, you are not giving women equal opportunity. They don't have the equal opportunity to compete. They don't have equal safety. They don't have privacy. So this was a pretty easy investigation, and we did find that Penn has a Title IX violation. So the minimum of time that the Title IX regulations give you to give a university notice is 10 days. So we gave them the minimum of 10 days and said, you've got to tell us whether you're going to comply. And honestly, it's interesting because Penn could have immediately pulled a Harvard and said, how dare you accuse us of anything? And they haven't. They're waiting until the end. And so we're still trying to see whether Penn is going to say yes, say no, or ask for more time. But even Penn asking for more time, there's a lot of money frozen right now from Penn. So even them asking for more time is still it's harmful, I guess, to them while they try and figure out what to do.
Well, you mentioned Harvard. Let's talk about that before we get into the big picture. Obviously, the administration is also fighting with Harvard and just pulled over $2 billion in federal funding from the school over anti-Semitism on campus. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Harvard is not very smart, I guess you could say. And I went there for law school, so I don't know what happened. But Harvard, we asked them to make a few changes to make their students safer, to make their students no longer be victims of violent racism, these types of things, structural changes that would be needed in order to preserve students' rights on campus. And Harvard lost its mind and decided that they wanted to pick a fight. And so that was when the funds were frozen. This was $2.2 billion that were frozen, but they weren't canceled. The grants were still active. We were just asking for a few things. And yet Harvard has decided that they actively refuse to comply, even though their own anti-Semitism report that they put out when they interviewed Jewish students on campus, said that students would try to not look, quote, outwardly Jewish on campus in order to feel safe. And that Jewish students felt like they had to say, when they were introducing themselves, oh, but I don't support Israel, so that they would become what they called in this report, a good Jewish person. So that's, it's unfortunate, it's sad, and it's unacceptable. But anyway, Harvard has decided that they don't want to make basic changes to comply with the law. And so our grant conditions, these are discretionary grants. Harvard is not owed these by the law, and they're in clear violation of their grant conditions. They also have $53 billion of endowment. So we canceled them. That's as simple as that.
Let's pick it up right there, because we're talking about $2.2 billion in grants, $53 billion in endowments. Should these schools be getting federal funding at all when they already have more money than anybody else will ever see in their lifetime?
Right. These are not people struggling off the side of the road that need the federal government to come give them a boost up to get on their feet. Right. This is Harvard University. It predates the union. I mean, it was founded in the 1600s. They have a long list of wealthy alumni. They have a healthy endowment. $53 billion is larger than the GDP of more than 100 countries. So, no, the idea that they need taxpayer money, that they need you and I to work extra so that we can provide for our families, because that money that we would have otherwise used to give to our families, we're having to give to Harvard. That's just, it's not in line with how a government should function. And if Harvard actually, so, Harvard says, well, the $53 billion, it's not in cash, it's tied up in real estate, that's a conversation with them and their donors. If what they need is cash, then they should be telling their donors that. And if their donors do not feel as though Harvard is a good investment, if they're not a good steward of funds, then why would it be a good place for taxpayers to spend their money? So Harvard absolutely can afford it's very expensive to go there. They're just a terrible steward of money, huge overhead costs, tons of bureaucracy. And Harvard has a real opportunity here. I think this is a good opportunity for Harvard to turn around and become the great university that it once was.
Well, I would love to see that happen. I look forward to seeing it happen. They certainly have the opportunity, and you're providing it for them. I grant you that. So the bigger picture with all these universities, I know it's still very early on enacting all these common sense policies that people have really waited and prayed for decades. So, it's just begun. But are you seeing any trends yet? Do you see any sign of, of how this is going to flush out in the bigger picture?
Yeah, I think that all signs point to a safer student experience, a university staff feeling more empowered. Now, let's just take Columbia. Columbia was the epicenter of anti-Semitism around October 7th. Before October 7th, their student groups were tweeting basically to get excited for October 7th. They knew that this attack was going to happen before it happened. That's how much terrorism was embedded in Columbia. There are private lawsuits going on about the amount of violence from Columbia. And of course, because Columbia has a certain student body and they are in a very liberal city, and there are a lot of people, whether they're student visa holders or outsiders, that have access to their campus. And of course, we saw all those images from the Columbia Library, and they brought in the NYPD. They barricaded these students in, and the acting president made a very categorical statement, not, we love both sides, but said no. Now, we need to see, so that's the basic. That is what's, at least what's required. But the things that I think that we're going to see change are structural changes to the university so that those things don't happen anymore. And that's what Harvard rejected. They said, we will not do structural changes. Calling the police is not enough. That is not the student experience that Title VI requires, which is that students should not be victims of racism in their admission, in their experience on campus. And so I think that is the type of change that you're going to see, is structural changes so that we don't have these instances in the Columbia Library to begin with. But at a minimum, we actually do see responses now, which is more than we saw during the Biden administration.
May, when we were out there, we got to see you during White House Podcast Row, but we also got to talk to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who spent 39 wonderful years out at Stanford. And there's some really concerning things that are happening there right now, because actually a student journalist at Stanford just blew the lid off a major CCP espionage operation that's happening on campus. And it's according to a thread on X, the Stanford Review, Chinese intel gathering is alive and well. And student sources say that they're scared to even speak up about it. So how is something like this happening on a college campus right now?
Right, because these universities are prioritizing finances, the money that they get from foreign students, rather than our national security. And so what we've asked from Harvard, and that we're going to continue to ask from other universities, is we want some more information about these student visa holders. And if you don't provide it to us, then you're not going to be participating in the student visa program, period. And universities are not going to be able to financially survive without access to the student visa program. I mean, they use it to pad their bottom line. But we need to have clear assurances. We need to have a lot of data about what is happening on campus with these visa holders. And if you're a university that doesn't provide it, then that's going to be the end of the pipeline for you. But another thing is not just the student visa holders, it's the money. It's the money that foreign countries are spending in our universities. There's already a law that says that there needs to be transparency, there needs to be disclosure about where this money is coming from, details about the money. And it hasn't really been followed before. The universities don't comply. So we signed an executive order basically holding universities to it. And same thing, if universities do not comply with our requests here, they're not going to have access to federal funding. There's a huge cleanup issue needed in our universities, and we are just at the very beginning of that.
Before I even get to the next question, I have to say, I mean, I have waited my entire life to see this happen on these campuses, and I've worked, in education in a previous life, behind the scenes and in public, talking about this. And so this is, I think, for a lot of our audience, I can speak for them. I mean, this is just true American heroism right now. Like, this is exactly what needs to happen. When I read that letter from the Secretary of Education to Harvard, I mean, it's unbelievable this is happening, and it's so past time. But what you're doing is really incredible, and I thank you for it. I want to go to the next question though. You have a bigger problem with these judges, right? And a federal judge just blocked the president from shutting down 3 federal agencies, including the Institute of Museum and Library Services, saying, of course, it would violate the separation of powers. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think the judges are the only thing holding the Democrat Party together right now. There's no leadership. There's no direction. All they can say is no. They don't even know what they stand for, really. And so they've put the full weight of their movement or lack thereof on these judges. And so the judges, I think, feel this weight, this pressure, obligation, responsibility to just say no to everything. And they're getting overturned by the Supreme Court. Just recently, the Supreme Court said, yes, of course, the military can pick its members. They can tell you what your haircut is going to be. They can tell you how fast you need to run a mile. They can tell you how fat you can be. So, of course, if they say you've got gender dysphoria, or you otherwise are walking around saying, I demand you to call me by these certain pronouns and that do not align with your sex, the military does not have to have you, does not have to recruit you, and does not have to provide for your benefits to feminize or masculinize. So that's, I think, what we're seeing is that you've got district court judges totally out of control, issuing these sweeping injunctions, and one by one, they're getting appealed and overturned. It's frustrating, it's annoying, it's sort of expected, but it's the only thing the Democrats have. And so what we're going to do is we're going to continue to fight. But what we'd like is a bigger, larger rulings from the Supreme Court that really cuts back on these district judges' ability to do this. Because if the Supreme Court doesn't do that, if they continue to allow district court judges to have completely unconstitutional, illegal, sweeping rulings with no facts. There's no trial. This is just, they receive a complaint and they say, now I'm going to give you your preliminary injunction, your temporary restraining order. If this continues to happen in such an illegal manner, then it will break the system. Because imagine a judge saying, you can't go in this, your military, not only does it have to look like this, but you can't go here. You have to go here. You can fly these planes. You can't fly these planes. You can go to this location. It would be unbelievable. And we are creeping in that direction. And I think it's a very dangerous separation of powers concern that the Supreme Court justices really need to handle.
This is music to our ears that you guys are out there fighting the good fight. We will do anything we can to help you guys keep that up here on The Mandate.